Hey, what is up guys? Today I'm going to be doing a video review of a company called SESH Motorsports. They made a AAA VR6 wiring harness, a standalone that I thought would be a great alternative to the OEM factory wiring. So today I'm going to show you what it is and what you can pretty much do with it to switch up the wiring on your VR6. I don't know if you guys know about it, but SESH Motorsports, they make a lot of swap harnesses. They're very similar to Eurowise, where you can kind of send them your core harness and they'll pretty much go ahead and modify and get you a new wiring kit. So what this one is without sending in your core harness, they can pretty much make a standalone kit to pretty much wire up your VR6 without the need of sending in your core. A couple wires just to start, and then a few accessory things if you need like ECU and everything like that. This is pretty much just the main things that you need to make the engine work and crank. And you can get it in two versions. You can get it in the standard length or the extended 11-foot length, which is what I opted in for. And then you can also get a tack converter, which if you're putting a VR6 into a body car that has originally had a 4-cylinder, it's going to be able to accurately read on the tachometer. So this is my Mark II right here. This is what the VR6 is swapped into. And here we pretty much have my beast disassembled with all the other wiring pretty much in the side yard over here. But let me kind of show you the initial quality of what we got. This is a part of the harness right here. It pretty much comes all like this with brand new clean connectors, repurpose, brand new connectors. They have it all nicely pinned, all labeled, so that you can pretty much just find the best way to run it for you and then do whatever you want with it in terms of wiring. So let me show you kind of what I did. So I got the 11-foot length. This is going to be not how they recommended it. They don't even really have a recommendation because it's so long. You can really do whatever you want with it. So you can see, I don't know if you can actually see, but you can see that back here I took out all of the wiring that came from the firewall, so there's gonna be none of that. I'm gonna eventually plug those holes over there. So there's no wiring. Took the battery out, a little bit of rust. Good thing is that's the only rust on the car, so I don't really have to do much work there. But this section of hose is about 11 feet long. This is what they extended. Standard length, you would probably only have enough room to run it through the firewall. Now, the way that I routed it seems to be the most logical, but pretty much I took part of it, made a big enough hole here that I need to clean up, but pretty much took the engine side of the harness minus, I think, the oxygen sensor and the ECU side that is in there, but we'll get to that in a second. So this side drilled right about here. Now this is, I don't know, maybe about like 4 or 5 inches down from this kind of like support pillar right here. And that will be run up alongside this crossover right here, brought down along here, and then I already pretty much wired everything up with zip ties. Of course, black zip ties are your friend. So I'm expecting it to pretty much come right up here, come down here, probably around the headlight or the grill right here. And so here is pretty much how I routed the front. Now, everything going to the injectors and what is this? Intake air temperature right here. You see it makes it easy because it's all labeled, so pretty much however your OEM one comes out is how this one comes in. So I pretty much took the two engine sides and pretty much kept them together for the most part. I didn't really change anything with that. You'll see it split off. One end is further down the loom than the other, but for the most part you can keep it together and just kind of not do a whole lot with that. And then I zip tied it across the front or the back side closest to the engine of the front support, because my radiator does have to sit on this right here. And terms of the injectors and where is it? Whatever. So you'll see a thin wire right here that connected to the oil filter housing right there. I pretty much just took that and just went straight up right by the water pipe and went down the inside of the manifold just as it would OEM, and intake air sump I routed right along it. Now a lot of the other stuff like the coil pack plug as well as this right here, honestly I don't know what most of these connectors are. It's a lot of Google. I routed right next to here, underneath here, under the water pump right here. You'll see a little channel going through, and I pretty much just sent everything up right up this side. Once you have this harness, you can pretty much delete that snap lock connector and take it all out, and pretty much run this stuff just up through here. This is a plug that goes to the block. I'm sure this is like a crank sensor. I use the original coil pack little wiring right here, and then everything that pretty much went to the manifold or the throttle body over here, I ran up the same place, but just kind of over along the spark plug wires, and then used one piece of that throttle body trim just to kind of hold it down. But here we have the throttle body. I routed mass airflow just right under here, and it's pretty much going to get covered by the actual intake. And lastly, there's a knock sensor down there where I pretty much also routed that line the same exact way as all these other ones, just going further down and attaching, I can't even find it right now, attaching somewhere down there for that second knock sensor. That is pretty much it. Not a whole lot going on there. The only other thing with this that you will need to do, and I'll kind of touch on it later when it comes to the inside portion, but there is enough room with this harness to pretty much move your battery to your cab or your trunk or anything like that. But that will require me probably extending the starter wires and maybe making a thicker gauge with them. But I don't know if you can see up here, but minus this, for the back of the engine bay, I took out the heater / AC. I don't even think this car had AC, but I took out whatever other components there were for it because I wanted it to be much cleaner. There's a couple studs that hold it in over here. I took that all out, and the ECU normally goes up here or even on that side, depending on what has happened to the car before you've owned it. But yeah, I took all that out and relocated it into the cabin, which is where it'll sit for the rest of its time. That way I can clean this up, put a nice rain tray over it, or maybe even cut this frame and just do like what I've seen people do. They do a nice like flat kind of rain tray thing. It looks really nice, but this thing's not ready for any engine bay paint. This is just me running wires to make it really clean so that it'll be way easier to take out when I do want to retouch up the engine bay. Let's go ahead and move on to the inside. Now, before we go on the inside, I want to show you what the hardest part of taking out your harness is, besides unclipping just all the little clips that are on all the sensors. The hardest part is figuring out pretty much what to take out in the engine bay, because if you're planning to do a full hidden like wire tuck and everything, you're gonna need to disconnect some stuff from the fuse box. And since this was already VR swapped, I don't know the full history behind the electronics of what happened to the car, but to my understanding this is pretty similar. So let me show you guys that. So right here is pretty much what you will see that goes through the firewall. This right here is going to be your engine side. On this side, this is going to be the interior. Now, what that consists of is mostly just following these clips, because if you're using an OEM or even a spliced Mark III harness, it's probably going to include your electrical, like lighting for the headlights, fog lights, all that stuff. In the actual engine harness, they're going to be like split together, which is why you see some of this stuff is trying to get split apart so I can get the lighting harness done. Oh, something's going on outside. Yeah, so this part goes into the engine. Now, since it's obviously together, we're gonna have to unplug from the fuse box everything that comes out of that harness, electrical and engine stuff. So once you pretty much follow the harness, you can see, you can just take these little mounds of wire like this and pretty much just follow them. So I followed this clump of wires, it led me to this in the fuse box, and I just pulled it out. And pretty much just kept doing that until everything in the harness was out. Like I said, this was probably spliced with some other Mark III harness, so I don't know the full extent. I had some random wires floating around, but luckily it all turned out fine, and I don't think anything crucial was unplugged. So that's going to be the hardest part of taking out your harness, and probably the most confusing to people, because it's just all spaghetti. But take your time, pull down the fuse box, give yourself some space, take out the seats, that's for sure. And then go one by one, follow those clumps of wires, and then you will eventually be able to disconnect everything and just push all of the clips one by one through the firewall. We are in the Mark II crisscross applesauce, as most of you will probably spend a good part of your time in here, or on your back right here looking at all of this. So this is how I can tell it was pretty much spliced into some other sort of harness, because I do see connectors that just simply would not be in a standalone Mark II with the Mark III dash in there. So the cool thing is with this kit, they're gonna send you this other bundle of spaghetti here. This is probably only one of the 2 accessories that are separate from the harness. You get this, and then the other thing that's separate is this connector right here, and that's supplied. It's just a fuel pump lead that just gives you power to the fuel pump. And then this, you can keep your Mark II cluster, or I mean any cluster you want really, and pretty much give it auxiliary powers and convert the tach from a 6-cylinder to your regular 4-cylinder cluster. So now that we moved that out of the way, let me show you what this harness looks like on the inside and how I chose to route it. So coming in from up here, pretty much where I drilled the hole through the carpeting, we put it above the steering rack, and there should be some sort of like metal rail right here. You'll see this, you can just put it right over that. And then, since this car, for my personal needs, I decided to take out the heater core and the heater stuff, because this is all just going to be shaved, tucked bay, all that stuff. I didn't really need a whole lot of stuff like power steering. So where I routed lines might be a little bit different from where you do them, because I don't have a lot of things that would take up room in my VR6. Now this will probably get routed up here, but you can see that I have my ECU inside the car, because this provides enough length to pretty much go, you can keep it there, but it provides enough length for you to mount it in the car, and I'm probably going to choose to do so right there, or maybe even just in the drive shaft kind of like area. Not the drive shaft, something else, I don't even know. But yeah, and then the rest of this harness, this is why I think this is kind of like the best way to route it, because you can see here that where the ECU goes, it does try to split itself off like this, which makes me think it's wanting to go up either the heater core side or something pretty much through the firewall up there in the OEM location, which is totally possible. But like again, you can choose to leave it in here. And then everything else that is in here, you pretty much have two relays, which don't need to be, you can screw them in somewhere, but they aren't crucial to be plugged into anything. You have your OBD2 end, which lets you diagnose the car, any issues, and you have your 2 leads for power. Like I said, this power cable is really long, so if you end up putting the ECU here, you're definitely going to have enough room to pretty much run it alongside the door panel right there and put your battery in the back. And then your negatives are pretty much the same length, or you can ground them to the chassis. And like I said, lastly, that connector, this will go to your fuel pump lead or your fuel pump power. So again, you can do that in the car via the access that you have through right here. All right, and that is pretty much how I think this harness was intended to go. This is not exactly who. SESH did not pay me any money. They didn't send me this for free. I bought this with my own money because I thought it was an awesome product. Eurowise does the same thing, but if you send them your core harness, it is greatly discounted, but they'll modify it for you. I was gonna do that, but then I saw that pretty much SESH Motorsports released this, and I decided to go ahead and do that because it was only like $100 more. It's much cleaner, it's fused in line, everything's extended where it needs to go, and it's super easy, and it looks super reliable. So really excited to see this thing crank, and I've actually tried to crank it. Even though I don't have everything plugged in, I've kind of MacGyvered the lines over here, and I managed to get it to crank over, no problem. Can't wait to pretty much get this thing fully in here with my seats, my amp, my new big bumper, and eventually this thing will get painted. I don't know what color yet. So many decisions. When you own a Volkswagen, it's tough. Now, one last thing I did wanted to go over. You saw all those connectors that I pretty much had plugged in. Those, technically, you really only need a couple things to get this engine going, and if you deleted some of the sensors on your car, that's fine, because you could just not use some of these connectors. I think for the most part, all you really need is your fuel pump, power, ground, signal to the starter, and it should pretty much crank at that point, as long as I think your coil packs and injectors are plugged in. But yeah, super simple, so you don't really need some of the sensors. I just kept them on because I really don't want to mess with deleting too much stuff. But yeah, SESH Motorsports did not pay me any money to do this. I just actually recently discovered them. Their pricing was super awesome for what the product does. Take your time with this. This is not going to be a one-day thing. If you plan it out really well, it probably can. For me, it was a lot of removing stuff the first day, and honestly, I don't have a whole lot of experience with electrical, fuses, running wires, stuff like that. That's the reason I bought this thing, because it is so easy. And I had a buddy help me out. We managed to take the entire harness out in one day, start running it in the same day, like running it through the firewall, and then came back a second day to clean it up, kind of run it again, because you do have to take off stuff like the manifold to get to the injectors. There is some disassembly. I took off my S&P radiator to make it way easier, and I suggest everyone does the same. But yeah, expect to take about like a weekend or two on it. Even though it is this simple, it's still, take your time with it, run it really nice. It's made to do what it says it does. It'll extend, it'll clean, it'll tuck your entire engine bay. And overall, I'm pretty happy with it. So I'll pretty much update you when I have it fully in and pretty much cranking and running, so that way you guys can see it in the car. But super simple. Thank you guys for watching, and have a good one. Just as a side note, if anyone happens to come across this video and they're looking for a set of wheels or something, I have a set of OZ 3-piece Fittipaldis right here. I tried to do so much research on them and pretty much try to find out how many there are in like the United States and everything like that. Couldn't find a whole lot. I'm assuming there's probably only a couple sets in the United States, but they are in pretty good condition. It says the Fittipaldi embossed. These are the predecessors to the Futura, and these are 15-inch face stepped up to a 16-inch lip, so overall 16-inch wheel, and I believe it's 9 or 9.5 wide or something like that. I'm not sure, but the tires on it are still very good. So if anyone happens to come across this video, these are for sale. Hit me up on my Instagram. It should be at vidodmark2. I'll put it just in the video if you want to talk to me about it. But and if you have any questions on how I ran this harness, because it's still fairly new, I haven't seen a whole lot of people do it. And honestly, if you know how to connect plugs, you can pretty much do that, no problem.